In the fall of 1941, a 27-year-old schoolteacher living in Oran, Algeria, packed 2 manuscripts into a parcel and mailed them to Paris. The sender, Albert Camus, had spent the last decade fighting tuberculosis. He had grown up in an apartment with no running water, and he had recently fled the German invasion of France. Inside that package, making its way to occupied Paris, were a novel, The Stranger, and a philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. The essay opened with a premise so blunt it remains startling. Camus argued that if we assume the universe is entirely indifferent to us, if it meets our deepest questions with absolute silence, then the only truly serious philosophical problem is suicide. Philosophy, for Camus, was an urgent, practical necessity. Before humanity can ask how to build a state, write a poem, or formulate a scientific theory, we have to establish the basic justification to continue living when nobody is handing us a script. The permanent gap between our need for meaning and the silence of the universe is what Camus called the absurd. It exists not in the world or mind alone, but in their collision. We seek purpose. The universe offers none. Humans invented ways to bridge this gap with religion, positing meaning beyond this life. Camus rejected this as philosophical suicide. It's a leap of faith that kills the question by smuggling hope in through a side door. Instead of hoping for an answer, Camus asked what it would look like to hold that gap open. He turned to the ancient myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down, then descend and begin again, forever. The labor is entirely pointless. Yet Camus insists we must imagine Sisyphus happy. He achieves this state because he stops waiting for the rock to stay at the top. He abandons any appeal to a higher court and fills his existence with the sensory reality of the present, the rough surface of the stone, the strain of muscle, the descent in open air. To survive the absurd is to refuse the comfort of hoping for a better tomorrow, while stubbornly refusing to quit today. A decade later, in 1951, Camus published a new book, The Rebel. The central question shifted from the private sphere to the public. He was no longer asking, should I kill myself? He was asking, should I kill others? If the universe has no inherent rules, and humans are left to invent their own values, what stops a powerful group from simply deciding it is acceptable to crush a weaker one? Camus answered by drawing a hard line between 2 types of political action. A rebel fights oppression, but affirms a strict limit, recognizing a shared human dignity that dictates there are things one will not do, even in the service of justice. A revolutionary, on the other hand, embraces a utopian vision of the future and accepts any violent act that helps achieve it. This distinction shattered the post-war intellectual scene in Paris. Camus' closest friend, Jean-Paul Sartre, read the book as an outright betrayal of the working class and colonized peoples. Sartre argued that real people were suffering under brutal colonial and capitalist systems. To him, if violence was the necessary price of liberation, then a writer who retreated into moral purity and refused to pay that price was siding with the oppressors by default. Camus countered with the historical record. He observed that revolutions undertaken in the name of a future paradise, like the Russian Revolution, routinely reproduce tyranny. When you accept no limit on what can be sacrificed to reach a utopia, the citizens become the fuel for the machine. This is the front page of the French resistance newspaper Combat. As its editor during the liberation of France, Camus had initially supported the political purges of Nazi collaborators, but he soon watched these purges devolve. What started as a quest to remove fascists became indiscriminate, mob-driven revenge. The process became impossible to contain. He realized that the moment a society accepts that killing can be redeemed by its political outcome, the moral floor drops out. Once the logic of justifiable murder is established, anyone can become a target. Camus eventually took this abstract debate and applied it to the most concrete institution he could find, the state's use of capital punishment. In his essay Reflections on the Guillotine, he argued that the death penalty is the clearest example of a society violating its own values. The state commits a premeditative killing in order to demonstrate that human life must be protected. The logic mirrors the exact revolutionary terror Camus despised. Camus's father died at the Battle of the Marne before Camus turned 1. One of the few stories he ever learned about the man involved a public execution. His father had gone to watch a state beheading, expecting to see justice done, but returned home unable to speak, vomiting for hours. Camus asks something specific of us. Think about a time you have wanted someone punished so severely that the punishment would require crossing a line you claim to believe in. He asks whether you noticed, in that flash of anger, that your desire for justice had begun to speak in the exact same voice as the violence it was meant to answer. This is the floor the rebel holds in place. Camus demands that we live entirely in the reality of the present, and that we relentlessly fight oppression. But he insists we refuse, absolutely, to cross the line where our fight becomes indistinguishable from the oppressor we are trying to defeat.